Hey guys, yeah, just way too much suspense. So I kind of have to know I have to know what's gonna happen next. I put the windows down as I need some fresh air. I'm still in the Toyota. It's still too loud to go in the house. Timmy's got his cartoons blasting. I told him to turn it down, but really, like every day we let him watch one cartoon, and this is his time, so I can't stop him. So I'm outside. I'm in the big Toyota. There's no one out here, and we're gonna knock off two chapters. So let's knock off 13 and 14. So remember, Luke is finally brave enough. He ran next door. He's trying to break into the house, but the door's locked, and he wants to meet the shadow child that's inside. So let's see what happens. Chapter 13. He had forgotten what fresh air felt like, and filling his nostrils and lungs. And it felt good. With his back pressed against the house, he stood still for a moment, just breathing. Sorry, we did 13. Sorry, we're doing 14 and 15. Anyway, just turn one more chapter. 14 and 15. So the door was locked. In all his plottings, Luke had never thought of the screen door being locked. Though he knew his own parents locked up at night, when they didn't forget, the doors of his house had always been open for him, and he'd never been near anyone else's door. Idiot, he muttered to himself, and he tugged harder on the door, but he couldn't concentrate enough to make his hands work together. Each second that passed made the hair on his back of his neck stand up more. He'd never been so exposed in his entire life. Hurry, 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 get out of sight! And the door didn't budge. He'd have to turn around now, and that was what his brain said, but his hand did what his hands did was plunge through the screen. He pulled the wire away from the frame and reached through, and the screen scraped the back of his hand and his arm, but he didn't stop. He fiddled with the lock inside until he heard it click. So yeah, he's like a thief breaking into the house. He silently slid the screen door back and stepped past the hanging blinds into the sports family's house. If this were a movie, this is when the music gets like, ooh. Even with the blinds blocking every window, the room he entered was airy and bright. From the freshly painted walls to the sparkling glass tables to the polished wood floor, everything looked new. Luke stared. Almost all the furniture in his own house had been around so long as he could remember, and whatever patterns and designs it originally carried had long ago been worn away. At his house, even the once orangish couch and the once greenish chairs were now all matching a sort of brownish gray. This room was different. It reminded him of a word he'd never heard, only read. Pristine. Nobody had ever stepped on these white rugs with manure-covered boots. Nobody had ever sat on those pale blue couches with corn dust-covered jeans. Sounds like this is like a family of aristocrats, not people that really touch the earth. Luke might have stood by the door forever in awe, but someone coughed in another room. Then he heard a strange beep, beep, beep. He tiptoed forward. Better to discover than to be discovered. He went down a long hallway. The beeps had turned into a drawn-out buzz coming from the room at the end. Holding his breath, Luke stopped outside the door to that room and gathered the nerve to peek in. His heart pounded. There was still time to escape unseen, to go back to his house and attic, a normal, safe life. But he'd always wonder. Luke leaned forward slowly, moving a fraction of an inch at a time, until he could just barely see around the door. Inside the room was a chair and a desk and a big apparatus that Luke vaguely recognized as a computer. And at the computer, typing away furiously, sat a girl. Looks like she's doing online learning at ISD. Luke blinked, thrown off. Somehow he had never thought about the sports family's third child being a girl. She was mostly facing away from Luke. She wore jeans and a gray sweatshirt, not much different from what the sports family brothers always wore. Her dark hair was almost as short as Luke's, but there was something about the curve of her cheek, the tilt of her head, the way her sweatshirt clung or didn't cling to her body, and all of that made Luke certain that she wasn't like him. He blushed, and then gulped. The girl turned her head. Luke croaked. Before he had a chance to think of another word, the girl was across the room and had knocked him down. Wow, that's some girl. Then she pinned him to the floor, his arms twisted behind his back, his face buried in the carpet. Luke struggled to turn his head to breathe. So guys, that's what you call a girl that grows up with two brothers. So, the girl hissed in his ears, you think you could sneak up on a poor, innocent, unsuspecting girl who's home all alone? Guess nobody told you about our alarm system. A call went out to our security guards the minute you stepped on our property. They'll be here any second. Luke panicked. So this is how he'd die. He had to explain. He had to escape. No, he said, they can't come. Oh yeah? The girl said. Who are you to stop them? Luke raised his head as much as he could, and he said the first words that came into his mind. Population police. The girl let go. Wow. I'm being honest. It's the first time I've read this. Super suspense. Excellent writing. This is like what we call like a page turner. Let's do another chapter. Chapter 15. Luke sat up, checking his arms to make sure he hadn't broken anything. You're lying, the girl said, and she made no effort to tackle him again. She crouched, looking puzzled for a few moments, and then she grinned. I got it. You're another one. Great code word. I'll have to think about using that for the rally. Now it was Luke's turn to squint in confusion. The girl giggled. I mean, you're another shadow child, right? Shadow? Luke wondered why his brain seemed to be slowing down. Was it just because she seemed several miles ahead of him? That's not the term you use? I thought shadow child was universal. But, an illegal, someone whose parents broke population law 3903, a third, Luke couldn't bring himself to confess. He'd broken so many taboos today, leaving the house, standing in the open yard, talking to a stranger. Why did one more violation matter? You can say it, the girl coaxed. I'm a third child. Why should there be anything wrong with that? Luke was spared having to answer her because she suddenly sprang to her feet, exclaiming, Oh no, the alarm! She raced down the hall and around the corner. Luke followed to find her jerking open a closet door, then punching buttons on the panel of colored lights. Too late. Drat. She ran to the phone, Luke following breathlessly. She dialed. Luke watched in amazement. He'd never talked on a phone. His parents had told him the government could trace calls, could tell if a voice on a phone was from a person who was allowed to exist or not. Dad, she made a face. I know. Call the security company and get them to cancel the alarm. Okay? Pause. And might I remind you that the penalty for harboring a shadow child is $5 million or execution, depending on the mood of the judge? She rolled her eyes at Luke while she listened to what seemed to be a long answer. Oh, these things happen. Another pause. Yeah. Love you too. Thanks, Dad. She hung up. Luke wondered if he should run back to his house immediately before the population police really did show up. They can find you now, Luke said, just from the phone. The girl laughed. They say, but everyone knows the government's not that competent. Luke started inching toward the back door just in case, but there really was an alarm. And you have security guards. Sure, doesn't everyone? The girl took another look at Luke. Oh, maybe not. She winced apologetically as soon as she'd said that, and Luke decided to ignore the insult. Do the security guards know you're here? He asked. Of course not, the girl said. If they came, I'd have to hide, and personally, I think my family just has the alarm system to make sure I stay in the house. They don't know I can disable it, but, she gave him an evil grin, I set it off sometimes, just for fun. That's fun? Luke asked, and he thought another third child would understand him. Be just like him. This girl sure wasn't. Aren't you scared the guards might find you? Not really, the girl shrugged. And see, doing it on purpose every now and then helped us today. My dad didn't really even ask why the system needed to be stopped. He just thought it was me making trouble again. In a twisted way, she kind of made sense, but trying to figure out everything out made Luke's head hurt. He glanced toward the door. If he could just get safely home, he'd never complain about being bored again. Here he felt as baffled as Alice in Wonderland from one of the old books in the attic. Or he remembered something he'd read in a nature book. Maybe he was like the prey of a snake that hypnotized its victims before it ate them. He didn't think the girl would hurt him, but she might keep him confused and fascinated until the population police or the security guards or someone else arrived. And the girl saw where he was looking. Am I scaring you? She asked. Shadow kids can be so jumpy. You're safe, you know. How about if we start over? Would you care for a seat? What's your name, anyway? Luke told her. Nice to meet you, the girl said, shaking his hand in a way that made him feel like she was kind of making fun of him, but she led him to sit down on a couch in the room he'd first entered, and she perched beside him. I'm Jen. Really, it's Jennifer Rose Talbot. But do I look like a Jennifer? She shook her head and spread out her arms as if Luke should understand something from her rumpled sweatshirt and messy hair. Luke frowned. I don't know, and I don't know any Jennifers, just Matthew and Mark and Mother and Dad. He knew his parents' real names were Edna and Harlan, but he wondered if he shouldn't keep that a secret. Just in case. Probably he shouldn't have even mentioned Matthew and Mark, but he was surprised into it, thinking suddenly about how there was a world full of people outside his house, and with a world full of different names he'd never heard of. Then I have to explain, and Jennifer is supposed to be like really girly and prissy, so the joke's on Mom. She wanted some frilly little girl she could put in lacy dresses and sit in the corner like a doll. She paused. Are Matthew and Mark your older brothers? Luke nodded. So you've never met anyone outside your immediate family? Luke shook his head no. Jen looked so amazed. He felt he had to defend himself. And you have? He asked with the almost same taunting voice he sometimes used with Mark. Well, yeah. But you're a third child, too, Luke protested. A shadow child, right? He suddenly felt like it might be easy to cry if he let himself. And all his life he'd been told he couldn't do everything Matthew and Mark did because he was the third child. But if Jen could go about freely, it didn't make any sense. Had his parents lied? Don't you have to hide? He asked. Well, sure, Jen said, mostly, but my parents are very good at bribery. And so am I. She grinned wickedly, and then she squinted at Luke. How did you know I was a third child? How did you know I was here? Luke told her. Somehow it seemed important to start with the woods coming down. So it turned into a very long story. Jen interrupted frequently with questions and comments. So you've never been away from your house except to go to your backyard or barn. You've stayed inside for 6 months. And gosh, you must really hate these houses, huh? And then, when he got to the part about seeing her face in the window, she bit her lip. My dad would kill me if he knew that I'd done that. But the mirrors were messed up, and Carlos bet me I didn't even know what the weather was outside. And, huh? Luke said, mirrors? Carlos? Jen waved away his questions. Luke Garner, she announced solemnly. You've come to the right place. Forget that hiding like a mole stuff. I'm your ticket out. I can't really imagine what's going on at the end. I'm thinking maybe she has friends on the internet, but keep in mind when this book was written, this was like kind of the beginning of computers. Internet was just